Hello everybody and welcome to another video. So in this video we're going to chat a little bit about a couple of house rules that SN Battle Reports have put out, and we're going to have a little look at them for the Horus Heresy, if they're any good, what I think of them, and let's get some conversation around this. Okay, so SM Battle Reports have put out a couple of house rules that they have for their Horus Heresy games. And, yeah, they kind of sort of flowed past me and wasn't really thinking much of them until they kind of turned up into my local WhatsApp Horus Heresy group chat. And people started talking about them. And I thought, you know what, let's have a video about this and let's have a little bit of a conversation about each one of these in turn. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring them up and we're going to go through them stage by stage and what I think of them and what I think maybe we could improve on them if they were to be used. Okay, so first one up we have the lasting templates. Now, I'll read what it is and then we'll go through it. So, you're no doubt been in a situation before. Your opponent has rained down some barrage weaponry on your troops. Now comes the lasting template unit under the unit. Models have to be moved and put back, and you've all accidentally picked up the blast marker by mistake. It's a pain, and in our view, can slow the game down. So, with that in mind, we've cut out the admin and kept it simple. If your unit is being hit by a barrage weapon that requires a template to be left behind to represent the dangerous terrain or similar effects, instead of moving models, you simply add a difficult terrain modifier to that unit, so -2 to their movement. If that unit would suffer dangerous terrain through their rules or the rules of the template weapon, then the unit would all take the test as required, up to a maximum of 10 models in that unit. Models would be fluid. Troops running the whole areas would suffer bombardment, so we felt it'd be more thematic. Okay, so basically what this is you get some weapon systems in the game like quad mortars that can fire 3-inch blast templates, and it can be a bit of a pain, and this is probably some of the reasons why 7th edition moving into 8th edition removed templates, because they do slow the game down. So I will agree with Pardo that this can slow the game down. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's because people mistakenly lift them up, but I don't think this necessarily slows the game down, and I think it can kind of penalise armies a little bit more by saying that the test is on all of the models when not all of the models may necessarily be hit. You've got to remember that the vast majority of these templates are only going to be the small blast markers, so the 3-inch one. Now, maybe a more simplistic, elegant way of doing this would be to apply of putting a marker on, like a little glass bead down on the table of where it would land. And then basically when you go to move or you move past it or whatever, you measure from the marker, and then everybody that was within 3 inches of that marker is then affected by that rule. You're not having to put down loads and loads of templates. You're just putting a little marker down. You could literally just move a model to one side and put that little glass bead down. Glass beads are really easy to get hold of. And it would be more of an elegant way of doing it. It would necessarily speed the game up a lot more, and it's kind of more of a sort of quality of life change rather than just applying. The reason why I'm not a big over fan of this rule is the part where he says that the unit would all take a test as required up to a maximum of 10 models. Now, I don't agree with that, because if I have a large unit of 10 models, tactical marines, but only one marine is within 3 inches of that, marker or on that would be on that template, then only one model should essentially be getting hit. It's the same as with how dangerous terrain tests do. You roll a dice for every model, and any one you get will cause a wound on one model. What this is essentially doing is turning that 3-inch template into essentially a 10-inch template. and I don't agree with that. It makes those weapon systems a little bit more powerful than what they actually are, and it kind of negates the whole point of them scattering. Some of them have rules like lingering death, so they can move. So, you know, no, I think the more elegant way I would do is to have a little glass marker down, and then you just leave that. But on the flip side, if you're a Death Guard player and you really like going in for 9 quad mortars with lots of rad weapons and lots of radiation and poison markers everywhere, then that is a really cool hobby opportunity for you to make some really cool 3-inch terrain pieces that you can put down on the table. So, you know, there's pros and cons for both of this. I think for the more elegant way, I think the glass bead and measure, because how long does it take to measure 3 inches? I mean, we all have widgets. Like, everyone has 3-inch widgets, and if not, you can get hold of a 3-inch widget. One 3-inch widget. Yep, these guys are within range. Boom, you roll for them. So, yep, I think there's a more elegant, refined way of doing this, where you're not overly changing the rules of the game and changing the weapon system, and you're still able to speed up your game. So, for my feedback for this, ditch the last part and actually put a small marker, like a token, on the table. Next up, we have combat spilling over, and this is basically, essentially, about duels. So, let's read what SN Battlebots has to say. So, in the heat of battle, mighty generals and fierce warriors rampage through the ranks of all of the enemy. At times, brave souls will challenge them in single combat, and are ruthlessly cut down for their efforts. The challenge rule is an amazing part of Horus Heresy game. Yes, it is. But it can be manipulated to create unthematic scenarios. Primarchs, or infamous characters, would be often end up in a challenge with a lowly sergeant and have the weight and fury of their martial prowess trunched by the duel. While they're ineffectively called for a challenge, knowing would negate the extra wounds, meaning many units with stubborn or inexcusable unfairly benefits in these circumstances. We have allowed these additional wounds to spill over into the continuing combat. A Primarch or other HQ, for example, would dispatch a unit leader and continue fighting others before their foe hit the ground. This stops unthematic situations and gaming combat resolutions that helps the game flow. Okay, so first things first, I disagree with this massively, and there's a number of reasons why I do not like this rule completely. Well, first, I will come from a narrative perspective and look at the Black Library novels. Now, during the Siege of Terror books, we have many instances of Sigmund fighting Chaos Warriors or Chaos Champions and Chaos Lords. And in every single instance that is fought, in the story and the narrative, everybody around that fight has not got involved. They have moved away. In some cases, they have stopped to watch the fight. Case in point, Sigmund, Khan the Betrayer. So, a narrative perspective, no, these are two epic warriors about to face down. The whole thing about the lonely sergeant bearing the brunt of this against the Primarch, well, these sergeants are essentially up-and-coming heroes. They are your future Praetors. They are your future Cataphracti Terminator guys. They are your future Legion champions. Of course, a lonely sergeant will do an epic deed of trying to take down that Primarch. On the Primarchs themselves, on a gameplay way, having the option of allowing a Primarch to hit in a duel and then allowing their wounds to spill over into the unit is absolutely bonkers. Because in most cases, that will probably kill most of the squad that they're fighting. Now, as an example, Leman Russ is something like 8 attacks. He's going to kill that sergeant with 1 attack. That means 7 other attacks are then spilling into that squad, killing 7 other Marines. He's decimating that squad. The challenge then becomes completely pointless and ineffective. Completely. there's no point of actually having the challenge mechanic in the game, because the Primarch is going to ignore that scenario. On a gameplay perspective, and on a gaming sort of look at this, the ability to challenge a Primarch or someone like Sigmund, who is literally just going to rinse whoever he fights anyway if they're not a character to equal stature as him, is a ploy sometimes to slow that character down. So if you're a tactical squad and you get charged by a Primarch, throwing out a challenge with that sergeant, yes, you know that sergeant is dead, but you also know that you have a good chance of delaying that squad for one turn, that you may be able to get reinforcements over, or a more capable unit over to that squad, that in your turn you may be able to charge yourself. Otherwise, Primarchs just run rampant, and characters like Sigmund will just run rampant. So I don't really have a sort of alternative or any feedback on how to make this better, other than this is a terrible rule, and it massively changes how the game plays. This isn't Age of Sigmar or Warhammer 40k. This is the Horus Heresy. Epic, heroic deeds in challenges are a part of the game. And these changes that they're presented here literally negate the challenge rule completely. So, yeah. Not a big fan of this one, so probably won't go anywhere near it. Next up, we have Dreadnoughts. Yes, Dreadnoughts. Surprise, surprise. So many things talked about Dreadnoughts. But first things first. You know them, you fear them, you are probably take them, and we all love the iconic Dreadnought in the Horus Heresy. But they can be a little too strong. Can they? They hit like a truck. Yes, they do. They're tough to take down, and they look good while doing it. For their points, Dreadnoughts can be devastating foe to face, especially if your opponent has multiple units of Talons of them in their list. Depends on what size game you're playing. We've noticed that the colossal war machines can cause imbalance on the battlefield. So can other things. So have limited them to one Dreadnought for every 1,000 points in your list. We've playtested this rule and found it offers a lot more balance on the tabletop. And if your opponent does bring 3 in a 3,000 point game, you should be able to handle them. Now, apparently my local group plays this. I don't. And I have often run 3 Dreadnoughts, not because I've stuck to this one Dreadnought per 1,000 point limit that I didn't even know we had. It's generally been down to the fact that I've not been able to fit more in because of their points costs. Now, are Contemptor Dreadnoughts strong? God, yes. Should they go up points? Hell yes, they should. Make the base points cost for a Contemptor Dreadnought 200 points. That 25 point increase is massive and will neuter multiple Dreadnoughts being taken in armies straight away. Completely. And Leviathan Dreadnought, once tooled up, is probably coming in at close to 300 points. So having multiple Talons of these in an army, you're kind of limiting to what else you're bringing. Also, the fact as well is, I do agree that if you're going to bring the Fury of the Ancients list, so that is the Rite of War where you basically bring a Dreadnought army, Dreadnoughts can be taken as HQs, Dreadnoughts can be taken as troops choices, as well as elite and heavy support. You can essentially run a Dreadnought army. This army is really, really hard to take down, unless you are actually, you build an army to take on it. So things like Haywire, melter weapons, things like that have a really good time against Dreadnoughts because you get that damage through and it's consistent. The FAQ has a big change to how Haywire works, and it now affects Dreadnoughts in a really big way. They don't get their invulnerable saves or anything like that now, which is really, really good. So Haywire, Melter, all these kind of weapons are really, really handy. Now, if you're going to bring las cannons, yeah, they're going to get their invulnerable saves. You're not really going to get the rerolls from Sunder, so that can suck. But, you know, Dreadnoughts are in a weird way that they're not vehicles, but they're also not monstrous creatures, but they kind of operate in between the two. And And I can see why Games Workshop did that, because realistically, in first edition and in 7th edition, dreadnoughts were pants, and would just get one-shotted, like, because they were essentially an armored value. But now they've got toughness, and they've got they essentially just a giant marine, essentially. I've seen a lot of people ask for lots of changes, from weapon skill, ballistic skill, toughness changes. Personally, I think a points increase to 200 points is probably the easiest way to deal with them. They limited them to 1 in 1,000 points. I don't think that's necessarily needed. I think Games Workshop, if they were really going to see dreadnoughts as a problem, then they could just increase the points cost on Contemptors. And that's the base points cost. So I think they're 175 points base before weapons. Bump that up to 200 points will pretty much fix the issue straight away. So again, I don't know. Bringing 3 in a 3... I've run 3 in a 3,000 point game, and my opponent hasn't really had that much problems. I was a good example. My friend Kyle, who's joined me on my podcast, the Northern Heresy, he hit my Leviathan with a command squad entirely equipped with lightning claws, and absolutely ripped it to pieces in 1 round of combat because of rending. So they're not infallible. Let's just say that. I would say that this rule is definitely something that you and your gaming group can have a talk about. And if dreadnoughts are a problem for you in your gaming group, and maybe, yes, limit them. But personally, I don't think they are. And I think if they become too much of an issue, Games Workshop can easily fix them by a quick points adjustment. So, yeah, we'll see. Okay, last up, Artifice Armor. So, Artifice Armor. Artifice Armor is useful and upgrade for your sergeant and other squad leaders, providing you that solid 2+ save. However, being a continuously reliable saving throw for your units can often lead to strange interactions. Your sergeant, for example, tanking every save, leaving an unthematic and skewed result. Did they leap into all of the oncoming fire, catch every piece of shrapnel from the blast? It can create feel-bad moments for your opponent too, and we've come up with a tweak on this rule. If you pay for an Artifice upgrade, unlike those that have already had it as war gear, you can only use that saving throw up to initiative of the model taking the saving throw. So a sample, a tactical marine sergeant would be able to take 4 saving throws. The rest would go onto the squad. Now, okay. Now, this is obviously more of an issue since Heresy 2.0 changed from the first edition. In first edition, we had wound allocation was done to the closest models. So if you kept your sergeant at the back of the squad, the guys at the front of the squad would be the ones that would be removed first, because you measured from your squad, from the enemy squad to your squad, and the closest models were the ones that were removed first. So this is a kind of a sort of a holdover from those days. And Artifice Armor is still in there. Now, I've seen other people mention the fact that we should go to maximum saves. The majority save is what you use. I would say that on that kind of thing, that you're then, like, your HQs then become less heroic, because they're no longer able to do anything because the majority rules. So if you put your 2-up armored, 3-up or 4-up invulnerable saved Praetor in a tactical squad, that tactical squad is going to take 3-up armor saves no matter what until they're all dead, and then the Praetor gets to do it. So all that does is turn that tactical squad into ablative wounds for that character. The whole thing about them not it being unthematic and skew in the results if the sergeant tanks everything is not I don't necessarily agree with that. I could cite a lot of real-world examples of combat where sergeants have led from the front and taken an absolute kicking to save their squad mates behind them. Like I said, their sergeants are your mini heroes. They're They're there to do the really cool, heroic things. And if that means tanking 30 bolter fire coming in is thematic, it's like, but you also have to remember that the game isn't just him. It's an abstract thing that we're using. We're rolling dice to tell a story. We are the ones that come up with that story. So if my sergeant tanks 30 shots, that could be the fact that he's only being clipped by a few of them, and it's rocks and walls and debris and terrain that he's moving through while you fired at him, that has been the one, you know, that's how he's survived it. I mean, we've many trailers where Marines have walked into massive gunfire. The Dawn of War intro trailer for Dawn of War 1 has a sergeant running up a hill at a load of orc boys, taking multiple hits and getting hit in the neck and everything else, and he's tanking it like a boss, and he's there right at the end. And it's a really cool sort of way when you play your game, and that one, you get 30 saves to make on a 2+ and you roll 1-1 and he's dead, and you're like, no, he was a fucking legend, and that just happens. And yeah, I think also the fact that you're paying 10 points for it. Now, another thing is, I don't understand the difference between I'm paying 10 points for this piece of war gear and this sergeant gets to do it, but this squad that comes with it gets to do it automatically. So this squad of 10, whatever squad they are, say Palatine Blades, all of these 10 guys have artifice armor. So rather than me just tanking it on the sergeant, I could just take this random Marine that it's not even a sergeant and just put all 30 wounds on him, because he's in artifice armor, and I can do that 10 times. Every single time I can do that. 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, until it gets to the sergeant. So I don't really understand the thought process about only limiting it to the paid upgrade, when you can essentially do it with every single model that already comes with it. Also as well, what is the difference between a Primarch with their 2-up save and invulnerable save and it will not die rule also doing it? Is that not the same thing? That Primarch is basically just tanked all of that damage? Like, I played Vulcan quite a few times with my Salamanders and had many instances where a lot of firepower, pretty much most of an army, was fired into Vulcan's unit, and I put it all on Vulcan and then went, oh, you've done 2 damage. And then went, at the end of my turn, it will not die, I've healed 1 back. And then the turn after, it will not die, I'm back to full health. So, I don't think there's really a way of how to get around it. And one of the easiest ways of getting around it is don't fire AP3 guns at a sergeant that has a 2-up armor save. Bring snipers, bring las cannons, bring melter weapons, kill those sergeants and then obliterate the squad with bolter fire. So, I think I'm not a big massive fan of this, and I think there's a lot of issues with it regarding I think there's a lot of issues, and also certain legions will essentially get benefits. So as an example, if my Emperor's Children tactical squad charges and you overwatch, do I get to do it 5 times rather than 4, because my Legion rule gives me +1 initiative, so I'm now initiative 5. So do I get to do it 5 times? So there's a lot of sort of nuance and a little bit of I don't think there's enough thought being put into this in regards to sort of making it balanced. Your opponent fires 30 rounds at you and you save everything. Is that a feel bad moment? Yeah. Is it a funny moment where you both can laugh at it? 100% yes. Are you both gonna laugh and when you roll that 1 and he dies? Yeah, of course you are. But that's the whole point of the game. You create the stories while playing it. So, yeah, not a big fan of that one. So that's the SN Battle Reports house rules. What do you think of them? What are you going to apply some of these to your groups? Are you going to bring them into your games? Let me know in the comments below. It'd be interesting in having this discussion. And obviously, you know, you can house rule whatever you want. Like, we have house ruled in my club a rule for the Pope for my Cities of Sigmar army. She has an ability that is pretty broken, and rules as written, I can essentially do that twice a turn. I spoke to my TO that runs our events, and he went, no, I would say you can only do that once, so at my events we will, you know, we will house rule that can only be done once. And I as a Cities of Sigmar player, completely agree with that. If there's an official FAQ on some of these changes, then obviously it's an official FAQ, so you've got to go by it. So, but these are house rules, and you know, talk to your gaming groups, see what they think, and have a try out of them, and see if they work. But I think there's definitely nuance in some of them that could be sort of done a little bit better. Some of them are just flat out stupid, and just don't work. The spilling over in duels just kind of negates the duel mechanic completely. Artifice armor can still be gimped just by units that already come with Artifice armor, or how does it interact with Legion rules? So there's a lot of things there that can be sort of asked of how that's supposed to be working. So yeah, hopefully Pardo watches this, and it gives him good feedback and maybe some things to think about. If not, well, it opened a discussion. So if you like my content, everybody, please subscribe to my channel, ring that bell, drop a comment of what you think, and if your gaming group are going to be playing these. And you know what? Check out my members area, because helping the channel will allow me to make more free content. And that's the way I wanted to do it. And I will catch you all in the next one. Goodbye for now.